and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Humm.
I'm the depressed again, Ann Northrop.
Because it was a grotesque week in the history of the United States as Trump has moved to solidify the right-wing hold on the Supreme Court, uses HIV/AIDS funds to separate families at the border, further degrades transgender people, insults allies, and pardons armed rebels against the United States.
And destroys democracy around the world. But other than that, there is some good news because the resistance is remaining vigorous, from the Statue of Liberty to the streets of Moscow.
In California, they're finding that bias violence is up double digits across most categories, including sexual orientation.
Tab Hunter, a sweet guy, a heartthrob for girls and boys in the 1950s, who came out later in life, has died at age 86.
In London, anti-transgender lesbians commandeered the front of the Pride March.
It's hard to even think of them as lesbians, but we'll discuss.
That's how they define themselves.
India's High Court is reconsidering the constitutionality of their anti-sodomy law. Things look a little good there.
Now, in Bermuda, we told you that the Chief Justice there ruled that, no, you got to have same-sex marriage, but they're apparently able to appeal a decision from the Chief Justice to a higher court.
To a court of appeals.
And maybe the Privy Council.
Now you sound like a Gilbert and Sullivan play.
Well, that's the drill.
In Colombia, the overall murder rate is down, but it is still high against LGBT people.
And the controversy over casting non-transgender actors in transgender roles intensifies this week.
So those are the headlines. Now, I must say that I feel compelled, I assume you do too, to spend some time on the terror show that is our presidency at the moment.
For a guy who plays a lot of golf, he knows how to cause a lot of trouble in the world.
He's a cheater at golf.
Oh,
absolutely.
What do you mean?
He doesn't
He lies
count
about his score?
He doesn't count all his strokes, takes mulligans, whatever he does.
Well, he's a lawbreaker, too.
Yeah.
He's a scofflaw. Well, I don't like laughing.
It's just a little character.
You know, it is so ridiculous that we laugh, and I see people on the panel shows laughing at how evil he is. This is horrendous, what's going on.
Well, it's, I think, one of those, if you don't laugh, you cry businesses. We're taping on Wednesday, as we usually do, and not always, but usually. So we woke up this morning to the sight of the President of the United States in Brussels yelling at the head of NATO about how horrible the European countries are and how bad it is that Germany would be doing business with Russia. Aren't we doing business with Russia?
We always have. We were importing Stolichnaya vodka when they went into Afghanistan, that's right. And people were pouring Stolichnaya in the gutter back then when they were the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. So we were getting their booze.
Well, this is all about, as people have said, this is about him ginning up his base, projecting power, projecting meanness and cruelty, and trying to humiliate and bully the Europeans.
But in the morning, demanding that our NATO allies pay the 2% apparently they're supposed to pay for mutual defense, that wasn't enough. By the afternoon, it's got to be 4% of your GDP, or I'm not happy.
I suspect even if they said yes to this, there would be other demands imposed to make him look strong and them look weak. It's a humiliating experience for us to have to watch him do this. It's terrible. So who knows what he will have perpetrated on the world by the time you see this. we must turn to the main story that we know something about, which is Brett Kavanaugh as the nominee to the Supreme Court of the United States.
53 years old. If he lives as long as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, that's another 32 years on the court.
Now, the first horrifying thing to me was how smooth and appealing he was at the announcement, with one exception.
I was going to say, not if you listened carefully, but go ahead.
Well, the exception was when he got up and slobbered all over Trump.
But also the way he talked about, I will respect tradition. Because he put the word precedent in there, you're supposed to say you respect precedents if you are a Supreme Court justice, which he's not going to do. He's going to overturn precedents. But he started with tradition. And of course, in traditional values, you don't have any same-sex marriage, folks.
Well, I didn't catch that so much. What I caught was that he was inappropriately slobbering over the guy who appointed him, who he may have to decide about when he's prosecuted.
Now, they were all right-wing nuts that were on the list, but this is not the one Mitch McConnell wanted because Kavanaugh has a much longer paper trail. And, Kavanaugh was quite explicit lecturing, I guess it was, or wrote a paper about executive privilege.
Well, before we get to the details, because I got a long list of issues, I just want to make the point that in watching him talk about his wife and his mother and coaching his girls' basketball teams.
Now, the girls are heavily into sports, and they talked about that at the press conference. That is the only thing that gave me any hope.
For them, not for him.
But even non-gay girls can be into sports now because of liberation.
Yeah, it's true, but I did have that thought myself. But then I turned on, of course, my barometer for public opinion, The View, the next morning. And there's cute little Sarah Haynes sitting at the table and saying, maybe I'm just being too optimistic, but I saw him talking about his mother and his wife and his girls, and I thought, this could be okay. This will be fine.
He loves his family?
Yeah.
But he doesn't love your family.
Exactly. So let's start going through some of these issues. Now, we know that you probably know that he dissented in a case where the court allowed a 17-year-old immigrant girl who was in detention to get an abortion when she realized she was pregnant. He said, oh, no, that's too quick. No, we can't allow that. She may have a right to, but really, she should be assigned to a foster care family before this decision is made. Notwithstanding that drags out the time that she is pregnant with the clock ticking. He really would rather that she not have
So that's
going
to be the major thing on that he's going to overturn Roe v. Wade.
And it's not just about
well, one of his friends said, oh, no, he's not going to do that.
Yeah. Well, he also, in a case that preceded Hobby Lobby, said that companies should have the right to withhold coverage of birth control for their employees and should not have to fill out the form referring the employee to an insurance company that will give them coverage.
So that's one of the big things that our side is going to try to get him on. The other one is the fact that he criticized the Supreme Court for upholding the Affordable Care Act, and they feel that he's going to overturn that.
Yep.
And the other one is what I mentioned earlier, that he wrote that presidents simply should not be prosecuted, shouldn't even have to give depositions in cases, basically are above the law.
Now, this is because he worked for Ken Starr prosecuting Bill Clinton.
Well, wait a minute. That's when he was saying the president was subject to all this.
Let me finish my sentence, at the end of which he says, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. In the future, I think, when I'm appointed to the Supreme Court by a Republican president, I will not think it's such a good idea to spend months and months and months going after a president.
Now, those are considered the hot button issues that we can get some traction on, and we'll talk about some other things and how he is really a terrible judge in person.
No, I'm only halfway through the list.
No, we could go through the list. I just want to, and I think it is going to be tough. I think it's doable, but it's going to be tough. I think the kind of thing that sinks a candidacy like this is if a skeleton comes out of somebody's closet.
Which it has. Last night, first talked about on the Rachel Maddow show, but confirmed all over the place, It turns out that when he was first up for confirmation to a federal court
Yes.
in 2003,
Teddy Kennedy held him up for 3 years. 3 years! And believe me, he wants to get back at liberals deeply. 3 years he was held up. And when the final vote came, it was close.
Yes, it was. By the way, the Family Research Council was supporting him then and is now, if you want to look for guideposts here. Here's what happened during that initial confirmation. He had worked in the Bush White House. He had worked as a lawyer and staff secretary for George Bush.
As did his wife.
So, yes, that's where he met her and they married. Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois, who was on the Judiciary Committee and still is, questioned him about his work for Bush because, of course, what we had there was all the lying about weapons of mass destruction, the Stuxnet virus against Iraq or Iran, I guess, and torture at Guantanamo and black sites around the world. So Dick Durbin asked him about his involvement in all these things, and he said, "Oh, no, I had nothing to do with any of it. Nothing. I know nothing. I
know nothing. I know nothing."
Exactly. Well, it turns out that we found out afterwards that, in fact, he did know about these things and was involved at least a little.
Since when does lying stop you from getting a job these days with the Republicans?
Well, it didn't at the time, but now all of this is coming out. They had to correct the record then after he got the job, and now, guess what? Dick Durbin is still sitting right there on the Judiciary Committee to grill him about his lies. He lied to the Judiciary Committee.
I agree with you on all of these things, of course, but I think it's only personal scandal that gets people knocked off.
I think lying to the
unless
Senate
you're president of the United
look,
States.
I'm not saying this is going to beat him. I'm just saying this is a real issue. That he lied to the Senate is something they take very seriously.
What's the penalty for that?
Well, I hope
Is the statute of limitations up?
I hope it's that you don't get your Supreme Court seat.
Okay.
On the other hand, who's waiting in the wings?
Now, I mean, the other thing, again, these are broad things that affect all Americans. He's, totally against the Financial Protection, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. He's against net neutrality, which you rely on to get, to websites. He thinks those things are unconstitutional. He was on the team on Bush v. Gore.
Yes, defending Bush's election chances in the whole Florida recount thing. That's what got him appointed to the federal bench in the first place.
And here's something. When the United States Supreme Court ruled that detainees on Guantanamo were entitled to challenge their detentions, he tried to undermine that ruling in many ways and actually rendered it rather toothless by he's been on the D.C. circuit for 12 years.
He's also against workers having rights to the extent we think they should.
Except when they want to bring guns to work. I mean, he's totally for gun rights. And he's opponent of environmental regulations.
Yep.
He's totally pro-business. Labor always loses. Business wins.
He's against voting rights. He voted to uphold a voter ID law in North Carolina. And he thinks the president should be free to declare any law unconstitutional, no matter what the courts say. The Supreme Court could declare a law constitutional. Yes. He says the president can override that, ignore it, and just make his own decision.
When they wrote the Constitution, the president was just supposed to execute the laws. So I do want to, well, of course, that raises an issue. I mean, all right, maybe when Ann gives her testimony at, in the hearings, it'll knock him off. But if he gets in, or any one of these characters gets in, it requires us to work that much harder to elect state legislatures, members of Congress, House and Senate, local governments, et cetera, to try to counteract these things. However, and I don't want to depress you too much, when we pass good laws, people like this can say they're unconstitutional. You've done, Well,
yes. And this whole business of, strict constitution, strict constructionists of the
Originalism.
Constitution. Yes, that we must.
Which he also talked about, basically.
Yeah, but this has always been nonsense. This
Right.
business of we must read the Constitution as written. Well, the whole point is to read the Constitution as written and how that applies to current issues.
Right.
When a court decides that the Equal Protection Clause in the Constitution means same-sex marriage should be treated equally to opposite-sex marriage, that's not making a new law. That is interpreting the Constitution as written.
When Alliance Defending Freedom goes after the calligrapher who doesn't want to make wedding invitations, and they are pressing that case,
Supports the
they
calligrapher.
say, but this would not apply if an interracial couple came in, because then it wouldn't be, I don't know what they're saying. They're saying that would be white supremacism, not religion.
Oh, yeah. So if you're a racial bigot, you're not allowed to define that as your religious point of view.
But I do want to say to you out there, all across the land and anywhere in the world that you're listening to this, it also means getting control of your legislatures and passing better laws. In most of the states that ban same-sex marriage, other than Nevada, they haven't repealed their anti-same-sex marriage laws, and we need to do that.
But for instance, in New York, we're talking about updating the state's abortion law because, which was passed a year or two before Roe v. Wade.
By a Republican legislature in both houses, Assembly and Senate.
But is now regarded as a little out of date and needs some
It apparently was
updating.
only passed in the criminal code, and they essentially want to make abortion a right. And that's what, so Governor Cuomo, who we've often been critical of, has called the state Senate back, which is, sort of divided between Republicans and Democrats, but controlled by Republicans. And so they're having a special session about that. By the way, last week I said Roberta Kaplan, the famous lawyer who argued the Windsor case, I said she was supporting Cynthia Nixon. She's not. She's supporting Governor Cuomo. She's supporting Zephyr Teachout for Attorney General.
Let's take a second to just remember what issues are likely to come before this new Supreme Court with Brett Kavanaugh or whoever gets confirmed. Now, I say, but who has he got in the wings? The fact is, if we can delay Brett Kavanaugh past the midterms and the Democrats take control of the Senate, then we can...
They can still do it by the end of the year. They've got several months.
That's right, because they won't have taken their seats until the end of the year. Well, whatever. We would be looking...
We want him to get rejected very late.
Yes, and then we want to have enough power so that we can at least force some kind of compromise, although given the Democrats, compromise, who knows. But here are some of the issues that'll be on the table. Marriage equality. Will this be thrown back to the states for individual state decisions and no more federal government approval of same-sex marriage, and federal benefits out the window, of course. Abortion, reproductive freedom rights. Will freedom of religion be elevated to an extent where
Yes.
civil laws make no difference? Will sexual orientation and gender identity be read as sex discrimination?
Forget about it.
Yes. Will marriage become second class for same-sex couples because federal benefits and state benefits will be taken away? Yes. Will trans people be allowed in the military? No.
Unless the Congress acts.
Yeah, and all the other issues around this. These are real things and fundamentally important, and we're headed backwards very fast.
Well, but let's talk about what's happened to transgender troops. Now, the president wanted to stop it, and Mattis and the Defense Department changed his position, and they're trying to stop it. But the court said you have to do it. So what's happened? No one has been let in. No one has been let in. The people are applying, and then they're said, well, we need more medical information about you. Oh, you had your ankle operated on when you were an infant? No, can't have you. Mm-hmm. This is what has happened.
Also, the Veterans Administration. The Veterans Administration.
This is something you can try to do something about. There is a comment period.
And we know how they listen to us. The Veterans Administration under Obama posted proposed regulations that would talk about the Veterans Administration covering trans medical care.
What they call
surgery,
gender
hormones.
alteration surgeries.
That's what they call
their
it
phrase.
now.
That's what their phrase they use
Well,
is.
under Obama, they proposed a good set of regulations that would expand Veterans Administration medical care to trans people for surgery, for hormones, for all gender-related medical care. Then when Trump came in, those regulations proposed were withdrawn. Then trans veterans went to court, and the court said to the Veterans Administration, no, you have to go ahead and propose these regulations. So now the Veterans Administration has proposed new regulations for medical care of trans veterans, except that under the new proposal, it says things like, it solicits negative comments.
Yes.
Tell us why you think this is a bad idea.
Yeah. Well, the comment period is open to September 7th. If you subscribe to our newsletter, go to gayusatv.org and sign up. I will give you the link, or you can do some Googling and find it. But there is a positive angle to this story.
Yeah.
Because in this thing that they put online, they said there is scientific uncertainty about the efficacy of these surgeries. Scientific uncertainty. So they're using the term scientific for the first time in the Trump administration. And they say, you know, the problem here is
You are reaching a long way for a silver lining.
We don't have, they also say this will take away, we don't have that many urologists, and this is going to take away from people who need urological operations.
They are so shameless
They're
and so relentless.
Evil.
And it's only going to get worse with Bill Shine as the Deputy Chief of Staff and Communications Director.
Bill Shine is the guy at Fox News who covered up for Bill O'Reilly over his sexual harassment. His wife, Dana Shine, was exposed this week for a series of racist tweets. Why can't I use the N-word? If they can say bad things about us, why can't I use the N-word?
Oh man! Well,
I mean, she did say the N-word at least, not.
Look for him to replace John Kelly as Chief of Staff. I predict by the end of the year.
Well, it's Goebbels, Ministry of Propaganda.
All right, sure.
Well,
but it's beyond the Ministry of Propaganda because Bill Shine is going to be Chief of Staff and he's going to control everything. And he, what was it that just happened that I was convinced he was responsible for? Getting rid of someone.
Well,
it's all going by too fast.
If you're over in the United Kingdom, the number of protests over there for this visit at the end of this week are intense at every stage of the game, to the point where he's not even going into London, basically.
And he's getting around by helicopter because if he goes in the street in a car, they're going to just attack him.
There's a women's march. That angry baby balloon is going to fly in Parliament Square. There's demonstrations in Glasgow when he's playing golf. In Edinburgh on Saturday, this big Stop Trump marches everywhere.
Yeah. Well,
and Americans are being warned, don't go out in London while these demonstrations are going on, by the American embassy.
And he didn't help his case today, so I'm sure that these demonstrations are only going to get bigger.
Well, just a couple of other things that he did this week. I mean, HHS is reportedly reallocating $585 million from Ryan White HIV/AIDS funds to pay for the separating of families at the border.
Where are your Ryan White care funds going? They're going to separate families.
He pardoned those Oregon cattle ranchers who were part of the 41-day occupation of a national wildlife refuge. He pardoned them. This is at the behest of Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke. What else? Oh, but on the plus side, the last 39 protesters of the inauguration were let out. They weren't able to be. They very broad charges against 200 people. They got a few convictions on lower charges, very few, and so that was on the plus side. And you know how they did it? They all stuck together and said, "We're not taking any plea bargains. We're not taking any plea bargains."
Good for them.
And then there's the thing about, fighting breastfeeding at the United Nations. Going to the United Nations. The United States, was threatening developing countries and saying, if you propose this thing about promoting breastfeeding around the world, and so we're not going to be able to sell enough,
Nestle's,
we're going to cut aid to you. So finally, who stepped in to bring the resolution? Russia. Russia did something good.
Surrealism in everyday life.
Should we go to the Statue of Liberty?
Yes, because there are some protesters who were also arrested.
Well, first of all, Rise and Resist, a group with which we're very familiar. We have a lot of funds. They went out on the 4th of July.
We know most of those
people.
Yeah,
we do. To the Statue of Liberty. They all wore shirts that said "Abolish ICE." They put up a banner up there on the parapet.
You can see it in the background.
Says,
we have a there
close
it is.
up, "Abolish ICE," which is
even though our logo it did not say "Gay USA
no,
abolish
but
ICE.
Gay USA does want to abolish. Did we take that stand? Yes, we did take that stand.
I'll take that stand.
And
let's be clear. Because this is getting manipulated and used. Abolish ICE because ICE is the one grabbing families as they come across the border and separating them, going into people's homes around the country before then and grabbing people and throwing them out of the country.
Stormtroopers.
Yeah, I mean, you can argue all you want about security at the border, but these people are just grabbing people and throwing them around.
Stormtroopers.
So then one of the members of Rise and Resist, Patricia Okumu, went up on the Statue of Liberty, clinging to the skirts of the Statue of Liberty.
In the back near the heel.
Yeah.
Now, this was all over the news.
Yeah.
It was a bit, I mean, they
for hours.
They got everybody off the island.
Why? Why did you have to get everyone off the island?
Patricia, the terrorist. So she scaled it as she got up there. Now, she held up a thing that said "Rise and Resist," and the other part of her shirt said something about Trump care. It makes us sick.
Yes,
but
yes.
She said the reason she went up there, she said, "I'm not coming down until every kid is reunited with their parents."
She is a member of Rise and Resist. She did not tell people she was going to do this, but she did plan it ahead of time. And I thought it was very poignant and very meaningful. And it was just astonishingly appalling how the press overreacted. All these live shots on CNN and local news and all this hysteria from the members of the press about how dare she ruin the holiday.
Yeah. What are they doing to stop separation at the border?
Endanger the police force.
Oh, Trump even commented on that. She said at a press conference she's being prosecuted by a federal prosecutor, mostly for misdemeanors, trespassing and things like that.
Yes, 3 misdemeanors.
But she called the Trump policy draconian and said no child belongs in a cage.
Cruel. So she goes to court to have a hearing on these charges, and she leaves court, and the press
they're trailing her
descends
everywhere.
on her. They have made her life so miserable that she could not go back to her apartment. She's in hiding, staying with others. It's just unbelievable the way they have come down on her.
By the way, I left out, in terms of the Trump visit, he is going to meet the Queen at Windsor Castle. And she's 92 years old, and she's not feeling well. And I hope she breaks protocol and smacks him up the side of the head and says, "Grow up, stop this. What are they going to do to me?"
Well, no telling what he would do.
She could do it.
Yeah, and he would ignore her.
I think it'd be great. I think the world would cheer.
Oh, of course they would. And he would just...
You'd be very popular with your people, Your Majesty.
To him, this is about class warfare. And he would like nothing better than to have the Queen of England slap him around, because it would once again prove that the elite are against him, and he is the man of the people fighting this kind of elitism. That's why he's going after NATO and all these European countries, because he is smashing the elite swamp.
The Queen does have a lot of experience meeting with dictators. That's half the Commonwealth.
Yes, exactly.
Half?
All right.
All right.
Should we move on to other things?
Yes.
Ugh.
How about that Jim Jordan? He's involved
Oh.
in this controversy over when he was a wrestling coach, ignoring sexual abuse on the teams at Ohio State, and this may prevent him from becoming Speaker of the House.
Geez, I hope so. All right, good news. Governor Murphy of New Jersey, the Democrat who replaced Chris Christie, has signed a bill to allow trans people to change their birth certificates easily, eliminating the surgery requirement. Chris Christie had vetoed this bill twice. It also allows for people to choose a non-binary designator on their official papers.
The Hawaiian Supreme Court has rejected a petition from a bed and breakfast owner that denied a room to a lesbian couple. The Aloha Bed and Breakfast said that same-sex relationships defile our land. They too were represented by the Alliance Defending Freedom.
Well, the lower court had found against the bed and breakfast for the lesbian couple. The Alliance Defending Freedom wanted to appeal this, and the court said, no, we're not even hearing your appeal. This is ridiculous. That was a violation of this couple's rights.
Take it to the Supreme Court.
Well, the ADF is then in Arizona appealing the decision against the calligraphy company, Brush and Nib, which had been found to have discriminated against a same-sex couple getting married in making their wedding invitations. The court said, you're a public business, a public accommodation. You can have all the religious opinions you want. You can post a sign in your window with your religious objections to same-sex marriage, but you cannot discriminate against this couple and treat them unequally to an opposite-sex couple.
Now, if you post
ADF is appealing.
If you post the sign, does it create a hostile work environment? Here's something that I'm very chilled by. Maybe it's just a proposal, but it sounds like another right-wing trend. Ohio Republicans are pushing a bill to require teachers, counselors, and healthcare professionals to notify parents if their child identifies as trans or is questioning their gender identity. Is this compelled speech?
We're seeing a lot of that. They're the same thing with gay kids in schools.
Makes it a fourth-degree felony. It's expected to go before the Assembly in the fall, Ohio. So stop it.
Well, Brigham Young University is foreclosing that possibility altogether. For the third year in a row, they have refused recognition to the Understanding Same-Gender Attraction student group. They can't even exist, let alone be members who would be revealed to the parents.
The Mormons are not giving up. But Jimmy Carter said Jesus would approve of gay marriage, but probably not most abortions.
We told you last week about the soccer player Colin Martin playing for Minnesota United. So when he was put in the next game after he came out.
In the 78th minute.
Well, maybe he's not a star. Standing ovation, hugs and high fives from his teammates. Big, happy occasion.
Thunderous ovation from the audience.
Yeah, no, that was nice. In Delaware.
Go ahead. Delaware's terrible.
Delaware, the Department of Education had written some guidelines, regulations for trans students in schools.
Sounded pretty good.
Good ones. You know, the Justice Department had gotten rid of the Obama-era regulations, which were good, and they got rid of them because Jeff Sessions and Betsy DeVos. But Delaware wrote some good ones. Well, some right-wing people got upset about that and got angry at the Delaware Department of Education. So without consulting anybody, the Department of Education rewrote the regulations to be bad regulations, that parents must be notified. They could use legal names only. They would not respect trans students' chosen names. No access to the appropriate bathrooms.
Are we going to turn this around in Delaware?
I do not know the answer, but I know we have viewers in Delaware who might tell us what's going on there.
In Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, They gave preliminary approval to a bill banning conversion therapy. But in Maine, the Trumpian governor, LePage, vetoed the bill banning conversion therapy. He's the first governor to do so.
And the House Republicans in Maine upheld that veto.
Well, they didn't have enough votes to pass it over a veto.
Yeah.
In California, for the third year in a row, they saw a surge in bias crimes based on real or perceived sexual orientation. In 2017, it was up 19% from 2016. Anti-trans complaints up 7%, racial bias up 16%, religious bias up 21%. So you read these, you see these stories on the news, the famous ones like the 92-year-old, Mexican-American guy getting hit in the head with a brick. I mean, it is getting out of hand, folks.
Well, and a 19-year-old guy thrown out of the Stonewall Inn here in New York this weekend.
Right.
Took a baseball bat to the front window.
William Gomez of Coney Island.
Smashed the window and the neon sign and did $6,000 worth of damage.
Where did he get the bat? Anyway.
Let's remember Tab Hunter.
Absolutely.
What a good guy.
Sweet guy.
Very sweet.
And
never really wanted to...
There he is in all his glory. With the picture we have up there, he wanted to, work with horses. That's where he was discovered, shoveling crap. He was, honest to God, that's how he was discovered.
And he was discovered and lured into the movie business. And then he wanted to be successful. So even though he was living a gay life, got arrested at a gay party, which the studio just decided not to make a big deal of.
Managed to survive that.
Yeah.
Back in the 50s.
And was very much part of the gay scene in Hollywood. But
well, he said, I was not into the big gay scene there. I was not really, accepted in there, he said.
Well, perhaps not, probably because he was too sweet a guy.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
But he had a relationship with Anthony Perkins. We saw a very provocative picture of him with Rudolf Nureyev.
They were partners.
But there was a wonderful documentary that came out a few years ago in 2015.
Tab Hunter Confidential.
Based on the book he wrote. He wrote
in
this
2005.
book. He wrote this book and finally came out. He died at 86.
And he's survived by his partner of 35 years, Alan Glazer.
Yes, so Tab Hunter Confidential was a wonderful documentary. We were amazed when we saw it because we thought it was so good.
It was good, yeah.
So here's the trailer from Tab Hunter Confidential, currently playing on Netflix.
All of the ladies in the audience, please go.
Tab, when I was young, he just was amazing looking. Beautiful California surfer that every single girl or boy would want to make out with.
Mr. Tab Hunter.
He was the embodiment of youthful American masculinity.
He was as big as they could come.
Are you Tab Hunter?
Yeah.
I think I've died and gone to heaven.
Kids and the fans just gravitated to him.
He was the all-American boy, and nobody sold that image better.
How do you shave, Tab? With a Gillette Super Speed, of course. What do you like about Tab Hunter?
Well, there's quite a few things.
Don't you ever think about marrying?
All the time, Ernie. That's what keeps me single.
Hello, I'm Tab Hunter, and I've got a secret.
I would go out occasionally to a cocktail party. Parties like this were illegal. And then next thing I know, the cops came in. I had no idea it was going to jump up and be thrown out at me years later. I was offered a 7-year contract with Warner Brothers. Whoa!
He was everywhere.
Tony and I met at the pool at the Chateau Marmont. We just kind of hit it off. And I went up to his room with him.
He wasn't after me, so he wasn't on the make. And women like that.
John Waters called me up on the telephone and said, how would you feel about kissing a 300-pound transvestite? I'm sure I've kissed a hell of a lot worse.
Every actor who has a secret like being gay, there's a part of us that are afraid to be who we are.
Well, I would never have talked about my personal life in the 1950s. I think you have to be true to yourself. I've never been as open as I am with you.
catch it if you can, slightly transphobic remark about Divine there.
Yeah, we apologize for that. But it is currently playing on Netflix, and that contemporary interview with him, he was in his 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, Tab Hunter looked wonderful his
There is a
entire
film
life.
about his relationship with Tony Perkins coming out, or being in production, that will star Zachary Quinto. I assume is Anthony Perkins.
Well, I don't think he resembles either one of them, so I'm a little disappointed that he's going to play either one of them.
At least it's a gay man.
Yeah, but there's some of those around now.
Yes.
Tab was, huge in Damn Yankees and in Polyester with John Waters. Also,
remade his career.
Next week we'll show you the trailer of another fantastic movie coming out. I say that not having seen it yet, but I expect it to be fantastic. Scotty and the Secret History of Hollywood.
Well, I have seen the trailer.
I've seen the trailer too, and you can show it next week.
And I've seen the interview with him on CBS Sunday Morning.
Scotty?
Yes, they did him a couple of years ago.
He was the pimp to all the gay stars in Hollywood.
He's like 96 and he's still alive, and he's a delightful guy.
And he has all these great stories.
And he says, I just wanted to make people happy. They call him a pimp, but he didn't charge these people.
He introduced Katharine Hepburn to 100 women.
150.
Scotty and the Secret History of Hollywood, Tab Hunter Confidential, for your viewing pleasure and to relieve you of the stress of what's going on in the world.
And I want to mourn the passing of Ed Schultz, who has died at the age of 64, radio talk show host, MSNBC.
Al Jazeera.
Well, he was always sticking up for
average people. Or was it RT?
The picture we have him up there is with Mike Rogers, the gay activist from Washington who we used to work with at the Hedrick Martin Institute. He always had Mike as a guest, but he also let Mike substitute for him on the radio, which was great. Always very pro-gay. He had a little bit more of a relationship with that RT towards the end
yes,
which
not
was not so great. But basically, I mean, he was so pro-labor. Why don't you put him on the Supreme Court?
RT did great coverage of Queer Nation going after Russian homophobia.
Listen, the only people who used to cover the gay movement in the old days was the Catholic News, because the mainstream papers didn't, but the Catholic News did. I mean it. Yeah.
We also note the passing of Tom Gallagher, who was the first guy out at the State Department.
He's to the left there of a woman named Hillary Clinton, who was the Secretary of State.
He's the one in the blue shirt and the red tie.
77 years old.
Yeah, and he said that he would work at the State Department. He worked all over the world for the State Department. And then he would go home, take off his suit, and go work for the gay switchboard, answering calls from people.
Well, when he came out, and he was the first person to voluntarily come out of the State Department, they used to force you out and then fire you.
Yes.
But he was forced in 74 to leave over being openly gay, 74. And that's in the Ford administration. He did AIDS work after that, and then he returned to the Foreign Service in 1994.
And tell him what Jane Wyman called him.
Buttercup. He used to caddy for her in New Jersey. He didn't like that nickname, but he liked Ms. Wyman. All right.
The first Mrs. Ronald Reagan.
Downtown Phoenix got a rainbow crosswalk to honor the LGBT community. And let's talk a little bit about what's going on with New York City Pride.
We are? I was going to...
Well, you know, here's the news. Maybe we talked about this last week, but Duncan Osborne wrote it up. We're all told you could only have 200 people in your contingents. You got to wear wristbands. They let as many as 800 people in their corporate sponsors. 800 for their corporate sponsors. It's a scandal. So that's why we have Reclaim Pride. We're going to have a town hall meeting on July 31st at 7 o'clock at the center. That's a Tuesday night. We'll be there. If we're still around.
And the world is. But yeah, what we want for Stonewall 50 World Pride next year here in New York is a big civil rights march, not a corporate party. So we'll be working on that, and we hope you'll join us.
We're tired of being used as window dressing for a corporate parade.
Or having to stay away from the parade to avoid all of that. We would like to return to the days of the actual LGBT community gathering to demand equality and justice for everybody.
And the people running it, Heritage of Pride, I'm just going to say this, you know, I'm a lot of volunteers. I know you're all trying to do good work, but you don't do good work. I mean, people stand there for hours on the sidelines waiting, and there are these huge gaps between contingents.
We're going to have a little meeting with them. We're going to discuss whether we can get on the same page about this and work this out.
We'll try.
See.
We'll try, though.
All right. Can we move to international news?
Well, let's start with the bad news. In Colombia, the overall murder rate was down, which is encouraging because they had a lot of violence there. But the murders of LGBT people stayed high. 109 last year, 108 in 2016, mostly gay men and trans women. The government claims to be pained by the violence. But the head of the group there, Columba Diversa, wants more training for prosecutors and investigators because most of the crimes go unpunished.
I'm going to hopscotch through some news in Bermuda. As we said, the government will appeal the ruling a month ago for same-sex marriage. The Chief Justice, they've been going back and forth between the legislature and the courts. We thought on June 6th we had won, but now the government will appeal that good ruling to the Court of Appeals.
There's apparently a court over the Supreme Court.
In Hong Kong, the High Court there says a lesbian is entitled to a spousal visa. The corporations of the world supported her on that.
In India, a 5-judge panel of the High Court heard the reconsideration of whether the anti-sodomy law is constitutional. People who went said, looks like we're going to get a good thing going there.
Yeah, although the lawyer representing the gay people who are suing to overturn the sodomy law started to get a little fulsome about rights, and the court said, hey, we're sticking to sodomy. We're not going to talk about marriage. We're not talking about other stuff. Just this.
Don't get ahead of yourself.
Yeah.
In Ecuador, the marriage ruling will enter into full force, even though the local civil registry there that was sued has appealed to a higher court. It may all end up at the Constitutional Court, which should be bound by the ruling of the Inter-American Court for Human Rights, which covers all of Latin America.
More courts there are ruling for immediate marriage rights.
Well, you've got Costa Rica, too. The national government is disposed towards marriage equality now after the election, but it seems to want to wait for their own high court to make them do it, rather than to legislate about it.
In Bulgaria, a court says a lesbian couple married in France can live as a couple in Bulgaria.
Well, the woman from France is in the EU. The woman from Australia, the partner, is not. But they're saying even though we don't recognize same-sex marriage under our Constitution, under EU rules, they should be allowed to live together. Of course, you're not going to have any rights.
We have limited time, so I want to get to, let's first show what happened in Russia around the World Cup. Some very creative activists went to Russia for the World Cup and each wore a different colored shirt from a different team and got themselves together in the streets of Moscow to be a human rainbow flag.
Because if you wave a rainbow flag, you will be attacked or arrested.
Meanwhile, in London Pride took place last weekend, and this group of, I would say, less than a dozen women crashed the parade. Now, these are women who are known as TERFs, trans exclusionary radical feminists.
So they're called.
They are called that. They are not feminists.
No.
They're not radical. They are just bigots. And they forced themselves into the front of the parade, and then they were allowed to march in front of the parade to huge booing and upsetness. The parade people said afterwards that this was shocking and disgusting. It was bigotry, ignorance, and hate.
These are the kind of lesbians who say, you know, now if I won't go out with a trans woman who has a penis, I'm a bigot.
Here are some of the things they believe. That they oppose abortion and birth control because they believe women shouldn't be allowed to have consequence-free sex. They're opposed to the Me Too movement. They believe men are often accused of rape falsely and that punishment for rape should be reduced. Gay men shouldn't be allowed to adopt. They align themselves with right-wing Christian organizations that hate mainstream feminism and are, women wouldn't get raped if they just acted less slutty.
Well,
this is who these people
as
are.
Chuck Schumer might say, they sound like they're out of the mainstream.
Oh, they're hideous.
It sounds like a very small minority.
They stalk trans women activists and
online,
harass them online. And it is just shameful that they showed up there and did that. They showed up in Baltimore, too, because one of their leaders lives in Baltimore.
Well, speaking of the United Kingdom, they did a big survey of 100,000 LGBT people, and 68% are still avoiding holding hands in public. 70% say they avoid being open to avoid confrontation. But conversion therapy was banned there. 5% said they've already been offered conversion therapy. 2% said they've undergone it.
In Italy, a court agreed to hear a challenge by a lesbian couple to a ban on assisted reproduction treatments. And at Wimbledon, a tennis player who recently came out, Alison van Uitvank, kissed her also tennis player partner.
She was famous in Wimbledon for knocking off the woman who won last year.
Muguruza.
Garbine, yeah.
So congratulations to her. She said she played much better after she came out, but she lost.
Round of 16.
And then she lost.
Okay.
AIDS news. The New York City Health Department has new regulations. Medicaid must accept legitimate referrals for treatment of gender dysphoria, surgery, medication, whatever.
And a new survey says that LGBTQ youth are more likely to use e-cigarettes and a lot of other things.
Let's move to entertainment news because we have a couple of videos we want to show. First, congratulations to Marvel Comics. The gay Iceman has his own series now. There he is.
The Iceman is kissing, but he hasn't cometh.
Okay. This weekend, or this week, starts the Outfest Film Festival in LA, which is one of the biggest LGBT film festivals. One of the featured films is something called Man Made, about trans men bodybuilders. We have a trailer for that film, and we thought you might want to see it.
So often in my life, just surviving was an accomplishment. Just taking a shower, just not killing myself was an accomplishment.
Making muscles in the mirror when you're 4 years old and thinking that's what you're gonna grow up to be. I mean, it's just making that 4-year-old in the mirror match.
So let's bring the lightweights on stage. I wasn't really sure if I was gonna do it until I actually walked into the doors.
You feel trapped for a long time. You feel trapped. The world just opened up, just felt free.
It's definitely gonna be a showdown tonight. We got some tight bodies.
Know that all these people, they all had the same courage you had to stand up there being judged by the world and not care. I've been called every name in the book, but I am doing what I need to do to be my authentic self.
That's me. Oh my God.
I was sent to the pastor and called out in the middle of a church, dabbed some holy oil on his hand and started slapping me on the head and praying for demons to come out.
Give me a bit though. I missed you.
I miss you too, Mama. We're all different. We all have different stories. We all transition differently.
I wouldn't want him to not be himself because I might not be attracted to him anymore. He was my person, I thought.
How can you not be okay with your kid being happy? Dead kid or kid? Boy or girl, I don't care.
We're not monsters, we're not demons. We're humans just like everybody else, we're just a little different.
I guess there's a time in your life where you want to stop hiding and just kind of live your life and not care what people think.
Thank you, gentlemen. Y'all give him a big hand. It's just nice to be called what I want to be called.
It looks very uplifting. But I mean that. I was moved by it just watching the trailer.
I saw the whole movie. I certainly recommend it. Outfest.org for the festival schedule, July 12th through 22nd. Also want to alert you that Angels in America is closing in New York this weekend on the 15th. Please go see it if you haven't. You may also want to check out Log Cabin, which we kind of were interested in, also closing this weekend. And next weekend, July 20th through 22nd, Cherry Grove Archive Collection Film Festival out on Cherry Grove with our old colleague Lee Sharmat helping organize that. A wide range of films, and they have a trailer that goes through some of the films they are showing. So we want to show you that trailer.
It was a very closed circle of women out here, but they were friendly with all the guys who were gay too, or straight, and it was an escape for everyone to be able to come out here on the weekend and be yourself.
After Brooke told us she thought she was gay, and then further on the whole transgender issue, I suppose that she sensed there was not 100% acceptance by mom and dad.
It was a really rough discussion.
If you had gone from a hospital room to a memorial service, to trying to help someone not lose their apartment, William was angry. He was angry because nobody was angry anymore.
If I wanted to be a saint, I would have died for our sins. Honey, I would be a zombie. I'd have turned my sisters in.
Can I sit here?
If you want to.
Finally, the moment has arrived. We're about to start the podcast.
Just to be proud of who we were, you know, and who we are was so emotional that I started to cry because, you know, I'm really proud of who I am. I was so proud to see other people proud of who they were.
Either you would flash me or you would leave me $1. So it was like whatever worked for you.
Grove looked pretty tacky back in the 50s. Not until the gay community that the Grove turned to be as pretty as it is today.
And little by little, as more women came to the Grove, we put more women on the team.
Downright evil, dirty dish. Now, am I going to use it or not? Either depends on what gives me and who gives me what.
One morning I woke up and there's 2 policemen in my bedroom. And so these police take me to Glenwood Hills. It's for people who are insane.
That's how I'm gonna talk the whole day.
I want you to stop taking money for sex. I thought you were okay with it.
I think it's always important to have gay pride.
Surprise! Hey, Jules.
I'm moving in.
Ginger Snap, I couldn't be more proud of you.
Tsetse Fly. I am the first openly transgendered firefighter in New York City.
Every single LGBT person has an incredible story.
I think right now there's a false sense of, well, someone's got it, someone's recorded it.
No, I think every day's my last one. I'm just gonna throw up for the party. After the party's up, I'll be gone. Back across the River Jordan. Out of here.
It's a wonderfully diverse roster of films. Go to cgacff.com. We'll put that in our note too. Next weekend on Cherry Grove, really terrific film festival.
Meanwhile, trans actors are speaking out against the casting of Scarlett Johansson as Dante, Tex Gill, a trans man. And there's this whole there's a lot of stories being written about it lately. It's like, you know, we want to play ourselves. We shouldn't have to just have stars play us who are not transgender.
Which is why Pose is so good on FX, I think. And this last episode, directed by Janet Mock, was particularly good. So catch up with Pose if you haven't, and we will see you next week.
Thank you for bearing with us.
Bye.